Hey folks, welcome to Cutter One. I am your host, Jay Just Jay, your resident troublemaker, your resident culture warrior. This is a re-upload. Let's cut right to the chase. This is a re-upload. Apparently, the two videos that I recorded last night, there was some issue. Probably I didn't hook something up correctly, but for whatever reason, apparently the microphone audio did not either get picked up in the recording or somehow got corrupted and stuff like that. And it was pointed out to me after they were already auto uploaded and made public. So I'm redoing them so that you guys can actually hear what the heck I was talking about. But I wanted to give a shout out to WD, who reached out to me and said, "Yo, dude, no audio." And I believe it's Kevin Galt. Correct me if I'm butchering your name, but thank you guys for letting me know that there was no audio. I appreciate that. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's see. Okay, so just hang on a second. All right, there we go. Now we should be much better. Okay, so the first article that I wanted to talk about was an article that I saw that it references it's a Star Trek article, so we're gonna shift gears a little bit from Lord of the Rings to Star Trek, another beloved franchise, something else I'm into. As I've mentioned it previously, I've got my Reliant and my Enterprise A models sitting off to the side there that I have to get to. But anyway, but it illustrates something that I wanted to talk about, something that I think is important. And I think a lot of people who are Tolkien fans and who are into lore and stuff, we tend to get this, but this sort of drives home a point. So let's go over the article. It says, Khan vs. Spock was Star Trek Into Darkness's best idea, but they ruined it. Star Trek Into Darkness had Spock fight Khan as its finale, but this logical matchup was ruined by the film's many ill-conceived creative choices. And then they go on to say Spock, Zachary Quinto, fighting Khan, Benedict Cumberbatch, was Star Trek Into Darkness's best idea, but it was sabotaged by the many creative blunders that sank the movie in the eyes of most audiences. After Captain James T. Kirk, Chris Pine, saved the Starship Enterprise but died from warp core radiation poisoning, a vengeful Spock chased Khan throughout San Francisco to fight on a moving garbage scow. What should have been the most epic matchup of Star Trek characters became indicative of what went wrong with Star Trek Into Darkness. Spock's long-awaited fight against Khan was meant as Star Trek Into Darkness's centerpiece, but by the time they faced off, the film had bombarded audiences with a bizarre reversal of the climactic events of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Kirk took Spock's place and died the way the Vulcan perished in Wrath of Khan, and it was an anguished Spock who yelled, "Khan!" which ended up as eye-rollingly comical instead of thrilling. Zachary Quinto's temperamental Spock also didn't fight like Leonard Nimoy's Vulcan would have. Instead, Spock rained punches on Khan like a lunatic. This was after Spock actually cheated by contacting Ambassador Spock to ask how his Enterprise defeated Khan in the Prime timeline. After Uhura, Zoe Saldana, watched Spock beat Khan into submission, they hauled the villain back to the Enterprise so Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy, Carl Urban, could use Khan's superblood to magically bring Kirk back to life. By that point, most viewers washed their hands of Star Trek Into Darkness. Why Kirk vs. Khan was always Star Trek's focus. Captain Kirk was always Khan's nemesis ever since Ricardo Montalban debuted in Star Trek the original series classic Space Seed. As the deposed ruler of much of Earth in the 1990s, Khan Noonien Singh fixated on the captain of the Enterprise as his foe. Khan didn't give Spock much credence. At dinner, he saw through Kirk using Spock to attack Khan with questions while the captain sat back and searched for weaknesses. Khan also personally blamed Kirk for marooning him and his followers on SETI Alpha 5 and never returning to check on their progress. Kirk being the captain, serving as Khan's adversary makes sense, but Jim was physically outmatched by Khan. Kirk inexplicably defeated Khan by bludgeoning him with a pipe in Space Seed, but he really shouldn't have been a match for the super strong 20th century warlord. Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan avoided this issue by never having Kirk and Khan physically share the same space so that their conflict was a game of tactics and strategy. But all the while, Spock was right there, yet Star Trek never positioned the Vulcan to fight or even outthink Khan himself. Spock versus Khan should have been the best part of Star Trek Into Darkness. Spock fighting Khan is quite logical, and it's surprising that the Vulcan taking on the genetically engineered Superman didn't happen until Star Trek Into Darkness, and technically has never happened in Star Trek's prime timeline. Spock's Vulcan physiology makes him many times stronger than a human, while Khan was enhanced with superior physical abilities. Khan's boosted intellect is also comparable to Spock's Vulcan intelligence, Spock and Khan are natural opponents on paper, but, like in the prime timeline, Star Trek Into Darkness invested in Kirk as Khan's main adversary. Spock's own intellect wasn't called upon to be pitted against Khan's in Star Trek Into Darkness, just as Spock yielded to let Kirk outthink Khan in Star Trek's prime timeline. Although Star Trek Into Darkness smartly seized the opportunity to pit Spock against Khan, the film blundered the execution so that the Vulcan's long-awaited fight with the superhuman madman was an uncharacteristically violent display of un-Spock-like aggression. Instead of being an unforgettable dream match, their showdown was an anticlimax. Spock versus Khan should have been cool, and it was meant to be cool, but it ended up as the sum of the multitude of wrong decisions throughout Star Trek Into Darkness. Okay, I agree with that. I didn't like Star Trek Into Darkness. As a matter of fact, I haven't liked any of the alternate timeline Star Trek films that J.J. Abrams and Bad Reboot have got their hands on. I don't like any of them. None of them whatsoever. But here's the thing, and the reason why I wanted to point this out. This shows, in an almost like laser-focused manner, why you don't just take an IP or a franchise and disregard or don't give credence to what made it the classic. If you ask any Star Trek fan, they will tell you of the Star Trek films, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan is probably everybody's #1 Star Trek film. It's considered the best of the bunch, okay? There's people out there who may think differently, but if you ask, especially people who grew up watching reruns of the original series and then the movies, Star Trek II holds a place as it's the best of the Star Trek movies. But what made it the best wasn't the flashy visual effects, although, for the time they were awesome. What made it the best was that there's and if any of you out there are writers, what I'm about to talk about is there's subplots and there's thematic ideas or themes that run through Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. A couple of them, and the big ones are, you have this concept of revenge, okay? Khan, at one point in The Wrath of Khan, he has the Genesis device, and literally he is told by his first officer, Joachim, that they have Genesis, they can have whatever they want in the galaxy. Khan discards that, dismisses that, because he is focused like a laser on getting revenge on Kirk. And it's almost like analogous. It's Moby Dick in space, okay? Whereas Khan is Captain Ahab and Kirk is the white whale, although I'm sure William Shatner would not like that comparison. But it's that same thing. It's that Khan is so focused on revenge that he ends up killing himself and his crew in his pursuit of revenge. Okay, his hatred for Kirk is that strong. Okay, so that was a recurring theme, and they were able to do that because there was this backstory. Okay, there was this lore that was built into it from the original series, the episode of Space Seed. Okay. A couple of the other things was throughout Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, you had this concept of you can't run from your past. Your past will always catch up with you. And you see this sprinkled throughout the movie in several different ways. There's Dr. Marcus and her son, David Marcus, who happens to be Kirk's son, okay, who he's never met, okay, because, she asked him to stay away. So now he has to come face to face with a child he knew he had, but he had never met and never bonded with. And so his running from that part of his past catches up with him. At the same time, Khan also represents your past coming back to haunt you. Bad decisions Kirk made in how he dealt with Khan in Space Seed have now come back to haunt Kirk. So there's this, you can't run from your past. You can't, escape it. Your past will always come back around and catch up with you. That was another recurring theme of The Wrath of Khan. So you have this concept of this, blinding revenge. You have this concept of you can't run and hide from your past. And then you have this recurring theme of sacrifice and finding yourself in a situation where there is no ideal solution. That no matter what happens, there is going to be a cost that needs to be paid. And they do this by referencing the Kobayashi Maru test, which is the no-win scenario. And it's a recurring theme where, like, even in the end, in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Spock ends up having to sacrifice himself in order to save the Enterprise and its crew. And so you have this concept of there's no way of not having to pay some sort of price. And they play it up by Kirk's history of being the only cadet to ever beat the Kobayashi Maru because he cheated. And then Kirk, sort of taking pleasure in bragging about that, saying, "Oh, I don't like to lose," and stuff. And then ultimately, you realize that there are some situations in life where you do have to lose. There is a cost to the things you do. So there's that concept of consequences and, having to pay the price in some form or another. So these were all themes that ran throughout that movie that really struck home with a lot of people. And I think that's part of the reason why that movie holds such a special place to a lot of people. What happened with Into Darkness is they discarded those themes. Those themes aren't there. They aren't built into the story. Like the article pointed out, they kind of focus on Kirk, but then there's also this matchup between Spock and Khan, because of who they are, and their physical, abilities. But none of those thematic ideas, none of those subplots, those intangible concepts are in or were in Star Trek Into Darkness. And I think that's why it will always be looked at as the cheap knockoff of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Now, how this translates into what we've all been talking about with like Lord of the Rings and all that stuff. And it shows how if you don't fully understand the franchise and the IP, you cannot do it justice by its very nature. You will miss the core ingredients that drew the fans in. In Star Trek Into Darkness, it's these sub-themes and subplots and thematic ideas, okay, that really made this movie the pinnacle of what Star Trek fans had come to expect from the films. And the same thing would apply, as we've been seeing and been discussing, with like Lord of the Rings versus the Rings of Power. Okay, if you discard those unspoken themes, those intangible concepts, the lore, okay, that Tolkien put into his work, then no matter what you pump out, okay, in your reimagining or modernizing of it, is going to fall short of the fan expectation or the fans' appreciation, okay? Because the fans are going to notice right away that it doesn't encompass those things that make this IP, be it Tolkien or something else, so special to them. Okay. And so I just wanted to point that out because it was just an interesting, using another franchise, they sort of, without saying it, it just made me think of these, how you can go so wrong by trying to focus more on modernizing and doing a retelling or a reboot of something. And what happens when you miss those intangible, unspoken aspects of a franchise that the fans will notice whether they're there or not immediately. Okay, but apparently Hollywood producers and writers, you know, don't can't pick up on that stuff, which is amazing to me. But then again, like I said, my position here is that current Hollywood right now in the 2020s, Hollywood, and probably for the 20 teens as well, creatively bankrupt. But anyway, that's just my opinion. But I just wanted to get this one out there because it sort of, ties back in around with the whole Lord of the Things and lore and so on and so forth. But anyway, again, thank you to WD and Kevin Galt for pointing out that the audio was lacking. I appreciate that one, guys. So I'm going to re-upload this one now. I'll probably change the thumbnail just to include like re-upload so that you guys know that this is the one that has the audio. Thanks again to you guys. If you like the video, give it a like, give it a share, drop a comment down below. I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are on these sort of intangibles that are connected with franchises that make them near and dear to the fans. And above all, please subscribe because we're still getting up there, but I've noticed we've slowed down a little bit. Last week we were killing it. Now it's a little bit slower, but you know what? Any forward momentum is still forward momentum. So, and that's what we're all about. So I appreciate it. I will talk to you guys on the next one. Peace.